Hello, everyone. Let's do a quick introduction. I'm Simona. I'm the marketing manager at Icinga, and I will do the moderation part today. And with me is Blerim, our COO, and he will take over for the deep dive part later. And to set the stage in one sentence, so what is the webinar today about? It's about Icinga Director. It's the automation and configuration layer for Icinga 2, helping you to manage hosts, services, rules through the web UI instead of manually editing config files. And with that, I would say, let's get started, and I hand over to Blerim.
Thank you very much, Simona. I'm a little bit surprised that plenty of you already use the director. I don't know what you're expecting today. It will be a beginner's guide. But anyways, welcome to everyone. My name is Blerim, COO at Icinga, and today I want to share with you what the director is, how it works, how you can get started with it, and also even maybe some small advanced topics that probably you haven't seen yet or haven't used yet. Let me quickly share my screen with you. Let's use this one. And I don't have many slides with me today, but still I want to give you a brief introduction about what the director is and how it works. So with Icinga, you basically get two ways of how you can configure Icinga itself. So the standard way of adding new configuration to Icinga is file-based. So you basically create text-based configuration files where you define your hosts and services and notifications and so on. That's the way how you're used to do it with other Linux-based tools as well. And this is basically the standard way of doing it with Icinga. It comes with pros and cons, of course. You can use Git-based workflows with text-based configuration files. You can create custom functions, which is not available in Director, a heavily advanced feature. You can use configuration management tools like Ansible, Puppet, or Chef, SaltStack, and others to create those files, which comes in very handy. On the other side, Icinga also has the option to manage the configuration in the web interface. We call this extension Icinga Director because it basically gives you the options to manage all the configuration parts within the web interface. Again, also it comes with pros and cons depending on in which situation you are, if you are maintaining the configuration on your own or if you have a team with you. It is less prone to human errors because it gives you a different way of configuring things than text-based configuration files. It is more transparent in some way because you get to see who did which change. And it also comes with automation capabilities, which I will demonstrate later. Icinga Director is a extension to Icinga. So if we look at this architecture picture, it demonstrates how a standard Icinga installation looks like. It comes with Icinga 2, which is the core. It collects the monitoring information, stores it into the database by using Icinga DB and Redis as a cache. And we have the Icinga web interface on top, which connects to the database to fetch the information that was collected by the Icinga 2 core and visualize them. And it also gives you some options to interact with those data, like setting downtimes, creating comments, adding acknowledgements, and these kind of things. Now, the Icinga Director basically is an extension that is installed at the same place where you have the Icinga web interface installed. First of all, it is an extension for the Icinga web interface. It comes with its own database to store the configuration that you created through Icinga Director. And at the same time, it also connects to the Icinga 2 core through the API to deploy this configuration. So at a certain stage, when you finish a configuration part, you hit the deploy button. And once that is done, it gets shipped to the Icinga 2 core, which will validate the config, and reload itself. That's the fundamentals of Icinga Director. And that's also my last slide, because the rest of this webinar will be live doing, basically. So I'm just going to close this here and get started to the practical part, which is way more interesting than PowerPoint presentations. Okay, so we are gonna use a single node setup during this webinar. This means that all the Icinga components that I just demonstrated in the architecture picture are installed on a single server. So we have Icinga 2 core installed, we have the web interface installed, we have Icinga DB installed. When you install Icinga on a single node, initially it comes with some basic configuration. This includes the monitoring of the host itself, where Icinga is installed. In my case here, I named the host just webinar. This is where everything is installed currently. Icinga puts some default configuration into it. It monitors the load, the disk, some ping. So this is what you get when you install Icinga 2. When getting started with Icinga Director, it is important to prepare your node, if you don't have it already, to be a master node. This basically means that Icinga has a zone, and so the webinar server, our central Icinga server, will be transferred or transformed into a zone, which is called master. And this zone is later used to deploy configuration into it. And at the same time, it also requires to have API access. Luckily, it is very simple to initiate that. Icinga 2 comes with some handy CLI tools. One of them is the Icinga 2 node wizard. So after installing Icinga 2 and the other components, you can run this to make sure you actually have a master setup on your node. It will ask you a couple of questions. All of them are fairly simple. The first one being specify if this is an agent or a satellite. So it is not, it is a master node. So we're selecting N here. Next up, it will ask you what the common name of this machine is. This is used for SSL certificates, because since we're transforming this node to a master node, it will also in the background create a certification authority. And this certification authority is used to manage certificates, SSL certificates, which are used by agents to connect to this master node. So the connection is always encrypted. And to make sure we can encrypt things properly, we are basically creating our own certification authority in this case. And for the certificate of this node, we just use the host name, which is webinar as a common name. Our zone by default will be called master here. And it will also create some global zones, which are later used. One of them is Director Global, so it also suggests that you may use Director later. We do not want to add any additional zones here. It will ask you some more questions about the bind host and the bind port. We'll leave this to the default settings. Now, this is an important question here, because Icinga asks us if we want to include the conf.d directory. The conf.d directory comes by default from the installation packages, and it includes some default configuration. Basically, what we've seen here comes from the conf.d directory. Since we're going to use Icinga Director, we highly suggest that we don't mix it with file-based configuration. Even though it's possible to mix Icinga configuration, Icinga file-based configuration with Director configuration, it is technically possible. We don't recommend it, because you can easily lose track of where things are configured. So we recommend to choose one of those ways. Therefore, we disable the conf.d directory to have a completely clean Icinga 2 configuration. So basically don't have any Icinga configuration here. So let's disable the inclusion of this directory. And now what Icinga did in the background is, for example, it updated the file zones.conf. Here we can see that it created the zone called master. It has one endpoint called webinar, and the endpoint is defined here as well. And additionally, we have 2 global zones. At the same time, it enabled the API feature and created an initial API user. API user that we can use later. In this case, it's a user with completely all permissions, which is sufficient for our demo purposes here. And it asks us to restart Icinga 2. So that's what we're going to do. And in the web interface, what we will see is that everything disappears. And this is by intention, because now we have a completely empty Icinga installation with zero configuration, basically. All right. Next up, we just gonna install Icinga Director, I guess. To do so, we can use the packages that we provide. We highly recommend that you use our official repositories, because they always include the latest versions that we release. There are also packages from from some Linux distributions. Still, there are sometimes behind. So it's the better option to use our repositories, so you get the latest version. There are packages available for Icinga Director, which can be used to install it. And that's basically it for now. What we will see here now in the Icinga web interface is that there's a new menu point that appeared here called Icinga Director. And when opening this, we still cannot do anything because it requires some basic configuration here. One of the first things that you need to do is you have to tell Icinga Director where its database is located. To do so, you can select one database resource. So Icinga Web has the ability to manage so-called resources. Resources are typically connections to other databases or APIs. In my case, I only have Icinga Web and the Icinga DB database, so I need to add an additional database, which I don't have created yet. So I'm doing this now. I'm using the instructions from the director documentation here. So you can follow these as well when doing it on your own. And for me, the important part is here. So I'm using MySQL, and well, basically I'm just adding the database now. So we create the database called director. We create the user, or let's drop it first, perhaps, because maybe it already exists. Drop. Okay, now we can create it just to demonstrate that we are using the actual things from the documentation. I give it a very simple password. Since it's a demo proposed, of course, in your production environment, you should use different passwords. And we give permissions to this user, to this database. Next up, we teach Icinga Web, or we tell Icinga Web how to connect to this database. We do this by creating a new resource. So I clicked on application, then on resources, and we have the resource type SQL database here. We give it a name. It's on localhost in my case, username and password. All is Icinga Director, and the character set is UTF-8. We can validate this and see that the connection is working. Now back to Director, so we can finally answer the first question here for the DB resource. We can see Director here is available. Next up, we can create the schema for the tables, so the tables itself and their schema. We can do this by clicking here. It takes a second or two, and here we go. So the database of director is still empty. Next up, we are asked to give an API user import. So why is that? Icinga Director initially, when you first install it, connects to the Icinga 2 core. The Icinga 2 core comes with plenty of predefined check commands that you can use. What we are doing in the first step by running this kickstart wizard here is we are importing those check commands that are already available into Icinga Director so we can use them there as well. My endpoint name is webinar. The Icinga host is also webinar. The API port by default is 5665, and now we get the credentials that were created before in the API users conf. So the username is root and a generated password, and we run the import. This takes 2 to 3 seconds usually. And here we are. So what happens here, you can see already on the left side in the menu that we have some activity in the log. So there are 254 changes to be deployed. So nothing happened yet. They are just lying there, waiting to be deployed. Icinga Director now imported those check command definitions. Those check command definitions basically teach Icinga how to execute the plugins. So it tells Icinga this plugin has this parameters and adds some descriptions to those parameters. You can also add your custom check commands, of course. For now, we are just going to use those that Icinga comes with. And well, we now can deploy the changes. We can see here that the deployment was successfully done. On the right side, we see a short startup log. The startup log shows us that everything was successful, all green. And what Icinga does in the background is that when it receives this configuration package from Icinga Director, it verifies if it's sane and valid. And only if the validation was successful, it actually reloads Icinga 2. So even if you deploy broken configuration or try to deploy broken configuration with Icinga Director, nothing bad will happen because there's a validation process in between. Yeah, well, now we have the check commands available. We could start monitoring. In our overview, we can still see no hosts and no services. So I would suggest we start by adding a new host. So this would typically be the first step, what you do with a monitoring tool. To do so, we can navigate to the hosts menu in Icinga Director, and we have multiple options here to create a host, to create a host template, host groups, and so on. When adding the initial host, it will ask you to create a host template first. A host template can be created by clicking on it, and I just give it a generic host name. In this host template, we can define a name of it, and we can define, if I'm using this host template, which check command is going to be executed. So basically all hosts that use this template are going to use the host alive, which is basically a ping, as a check command. Additionally, we have some more parameters here that we should take care of. The check interval, we set this to 5 minutes. So every 5 minutes, the check is going to be executed. The retry interval is going to be 1 minute. So if one attempt fails, it will not wait another 5 minutes. It will do the next retry within a minute. And the maximum of attempts is 3 in this case. So after 3 attempts, if all of those return a problematic state, it will transition into a hard state, which will trigger notifications. And yeah, so we enable that active checks are going to be done here. We will accept passive checks as well. We will enable notifications. We will enable event handlers and performance data. So finally, we should be ready to create the first host now. We can already see there's one activity marked here. Again, nothing happened yet. So Icinga 2 is still running with the old configuration. If we add a new host now, the first thing that we have to do is to pick a template. Based on this template, some parameters will be set. So we give it a host name. In my case, my first host here will be webinars, so the machine where everything is installed on. It needs a host address. This could be the FQDN or an IP address. And well, that's all I have to do for now, I guess. So let's add this and check the activity log. Here in the activity log, we always can see the changes before they are deployed, of course, also afterwards. So you can verify again, I have a template that I created, all the settings that I've done, and I also have the actual host that I created. The file or the format that you see here on the right side is actually Icinga 2 configuration. So what the director does is, using those forms and settings and dropdowns and so on, it builds actually Icinga 2 configuration in the background. So in the end, it's the very same like using configuration files, but with a nicer front end. If we are happy with those changes we made, we can deploy it here. And again, we see it gets verified. And in the overview, hooray, we have our first host configured. As easy as this. So it took not much time to actually create this. This is fairly simple. The next step would be to attach an agent to this setup. So not only the local host where Icinga is already running, but add an additional host and connect it to Icinga. To do so, I'm going to start by creating a new host template and just call it Icinga agent. To make my life easier, I will use or inherit the settings from the generic host, so I don't have to do it again. And whenever I change those settings in generic host, they're going to change here as well. Of course, I can override them here. Not interested in that now. What I'm interested in is the agent and zone settings. Here, we're going to set that all hosts using this template are Icinga 2 agents. We allow Icinga to establish the connection to those agents, and we define that those agents that we're going to use, they accept configuration from this server, from this Icinga server. That's all changes we make for now. And next up, we create the agent host to be monitored, which uses this template. So I'm picking Icinga 2 agent here. I give it a name. It's called agent. The host address is agent because I have DNS configured here. And no additional properties for now. One thing that I missed, when you create a new host where Icinga 2 agent is enabled, you will see on the top bar here that there's an agent tab. This agent tab can be important for you because it gives you options how to actually install the agent on your to-be monitored server. You have the option for a manual configuration. You have the option with a script for Windows. You have the option with a script for Linux. I'm going to choose the manual configuration here. So let's install Icinga on the agent. I'm on a different machine now called agent. And I'm going to install Icinga Director. And I'm going to install the package monitoring plugins because it includes a bunch of nice to have plugins that we can start using right away. Here as well, I'm using the Icinga 2 node wizard, like on the other side. But this time, I'm going to specify that I am creating an agent here. So we leave it to yes. The common name for the certificate that is going to be created is agent. The parent endpoint is called webinar. That's my master server. We want to establish the connection from this side as well. So basically, Icinga tries to establish the connection from the master side, but also from the agent side. So either way is working. Master endpoint host IP address, in my case, is webinar because of DNS. The port is the default port, and we don't want to add any additional permission denied. Okay, let's see. You can now see how I'm live debugging here. I'm just gonna remove it for now, or let's purge everything and repeat this. Okay. So let's install it again and run the node wizard one more time. It's an agent connecting to webinar, establish the connection, FQDN, port, no more. Damn it. I don't know why this is done here. Perhaps it's AppArmor or something. I don't know. But we can leave it for now like this and just continue. So imagine that this node wizard actually worked, because I cannot figure out for now why it is failing. Let me think quickly. I guess it has to do something with AppArmor, but I'm not sure, and I don't want to start debugging right away. So what this does is similar to what we've seen on the master side. It basically creates the configuration for the zone and for the endpoint. It creates a certificate signing request, and it connects to the master, and it asks the master to sign their signing request. And if the master allows it, it returns the certificate, and the agent starts and connects to the master. So we can just imagine here that this has worked for now. That's too bad. Function call. Well, not debugging live right now. So let's imagine that just works because it typically does. And next up, we can. So we created the host already, okay, and we can deploy it now. So what we see here is we created the template, Icinga agent, and when using this template this time, it does not only create the host object, it also creates the endpoint object automatically, and it also creates the zone object. This is important because with these two settings, Icinga actually knows where to connect to and where to expect connections from. Deploying this, hopefully will result in a green state. All good. We have now 2 hosts configured here. Let's verify in the overview. Now we have 2 agents here. They look very similar because actually also from this perspective, they are similar. The only difference here is now that if I have an Icinga 2 agent, I can deploy checks to those agents. So if I want to monitor local resources, I can define that those checks are to be executed on the agent itself. So for example, to access the disk or the load or memory or applications, processes, and so on. So from here, we could start create a new service because those 2 hosts are empty now. And we want to monitor the first thing on those hosts. To create a service, there are multiple options available. You can create a single service, which basically means you're creating one single service and you define which host should get the service. When you do this, you have to create each and every service manually. So every time you add a new service, you have to use this single service thing. So this is not very flexible. The more flexible way is to create a service apply rule. A service apply rule is able to express where this service, to which hosts this service should be applied to. To demonstrate this, I'm going to use custom variables. With custom variables, you can add meta information to your hosts. Meta information like where this host is located, which kind of type this host is, which operating system is running on it, whatever you have. I'm going to create a new custom variable, like in Director, they are called data fields, and just give it a name, OS type for operating system type, a nice caption. And in my example, this data field will be a string. And once I have this configured, I can add it to my template that I created previously, Icinga agent. There's a fields tab here on the top where I can choose which fields are available when using this template. I can also pick if this field I'm currently adding is optional or mandatory. And once added, the field will appear at all hosts that use this template. So if I open the edit view of the agent, I will have a new view here called custom properties. And in my case, I've added the OS type, and I could type in anything here, Linux or Windows or whatever. This is already a good option, but we can even do better by using data lists. And data lists are a way of providing available options to those custom variables. So the user or you yourself do not have to write strings there because they are, you can have typos and so on. So we're going to create a list of available options, also call it OS type. And the available options in my case are Linux. And the other option is Windows, for example. But this could be anything. This could be your location. This could be some SNMP settings. This could be basically anything, any type of information that you have to enrich the information about your hosts. And now we're going to edit the actual data field. So it's not going to be a string anymore. Instead, we're using a data list. And the list we called is OS type. And the target type, it's going to be a string here. So once I select one of these options, Director is going to transform it into a string type. Let's head back to the host itself, agent here. And we open the custom properties again. And what has changed here is that the OS operating system type is not an input field anymore. It's a drop-down where we only can pick one of those options that we predefined. I'm gonna pick Linux here and see what our Icinga Director creates out of this. It modifies the host called agent, and it adds a custom variable called OS type. And in this case, I've set it to Linux. Why did I do this? By adding this kind of information to your hosts, you can create way more flexible service apply rules, because you can use this information to actually tell Icinga how to behave and what to actually do. A service apply rule basically expresses which services should be created dynamically. But before creating any service, we need to create a template first. Like with the host, we give it a name. This time I'm leaving the check command blank. we give it an interval. Every 5 minutes it should be checked. Every minute it should be retried. Maximum attempts is 3. After that it becomes a hard state. And I'm going to enable the active checks and accept passive checks and enable notifications and event handlers. So once I have this template, I can start creating apply rules. And in my case, I want to monitor SSH on all Linux machines. This is something very typical. So I'm creating a service called SSH, or a service apply rule, that will create a service called SSH. It imports this template where we did the basic settings. It will execute the SSH check command. And we will assign this to all hosts where the operating system type is set to Linux. So the template is created and the apply service is generated. So we're going to apply the SSH service with the SSH command everywhere where the host variable is set to Linux. If you remember correctly, we created this custom variable for only one host, which is the agent host. Or did we? Yes, we did. Because the service now appears here. On the other host where we didn't use this custom variable, the services list is still empty. All right, this is already cool for now because you can add your hosts and you can create a whole bunch of service apply rules to tell Icinga what to monitor. The only thing that could be better at this stage is that you still have to kind of create the hosts manually. If you have only a bunch of hosts, this is easy. You can work it out. If you have hundreds of thousands of hosts, Icinga Director comes with an automation option that helps you do this. Icinga Director has the option to connect to third-party databases and fetch information and use this information to create Icinga configuration out of it. This could be, for example, your inventory, like a CMDB or a REST API of some tool. For example, Netbox is very popular these days as some type of CMDB. So the import source basically tells Icinga Director where to connect to and how to fetch information that we're going to use later to create Icinga configuration out of it. So I'm just going to use a very simple database that I've created. My database has only one table called hosts. And my inventory database has a bunch of informations included. So in my inventory, I have many host names. They have types, they have addresses. There's an environment, location, and some SNMP things configured. And I want to use this data in my Icinga setup. To do so, I create an import source. I will just call it CMDB. This is where our inventory is. And the source type is SQL, because I'm going to use SQL statements and directly connect to the database. To be able to connect to the database, again, I need to add a resource to Icinga Web so it knows how to connect to the CMDB. Give it a name. The database is called CMDB. Validate. Okay, I'm able to connect. Let's repeat this and add the import source. So you can see there are other options as well as a source type. There's also a source type available where you can import files like JSON, XML, or YAML files. In my case, I'm going to use SQL. And the key column name, Well, the unique identifier here in my case is the host name. So I'm going to use this as the key column name. I'm going to connect to the CMDB, and now I write my query. So what do I want to select? I want to select the type or the host name, the address, the type, environment, and location. I'm going to leave out all the SNMP stuff because I'm not going to use this here. From the table hosts. Nothing happened yet. So we also already can see that it's currently unknown whether there are changes here or not. So we can check for changes first. And it tells us there are pending changes. And before actually importing this data, we can see in the preview what we would import if we run it. So we can see a bunch of host names here, addresses, and so on. And we can trigger the import. And here we are, so pretty fast here. Additionally to that, there's something called modifiers. With modifiers, you can bring your data in shape. So typically, those inventory databases or whatever tools you connect here, sometimes they don't deliver the data in the format that you want to have them in Icinga. What you can do then is you can modify this data that you import before creating Icinga configuration out of it. So I'm gonna modify the host name. We can pick a target property. It should remain the same. So we override it basically. And there are plenty of modifiers available. You can get the DNS records. You can decode JSON. You can fix the IP format. You can do many different things. So there are plenty of different modifiers available. I'm going to use here the replace modifier, and I'm replacing the string vm-icinga.com from the domain with dummy example.com. What happens now is that basically the FQDN changes. So my original FQDN was vm-icinga.com. The one that I'm going to use here is dummy-icinga.com. We can add more than one property, so I can also change other fields as well and make the environment value always uppercase. So environment will always be uppercase here. Check for changes and import it. So at this stage, actually from the configuration perspective, nothing happened because we only imported the data. Now we're going to use this data and make Icinga 2 configuration out of it. So our next step would be to create a synchronization rule. We give it a name like CMDB, and we are going to create hosts. Whenever something updates from the import source, we're going to replace the existing entries. We can also try to merge or update things or ignore them, but I want to have the exact same state like in the inventory database in my Icinga, so I'm going to just always replace it. If something from the database disappears, we're going to purge it in Icinga as well. By purging, we mean delete. We could also disable it, but we're actually going to delete it. These are the basics of a synchronization rule. The actual works happens when adding properties. With property rules, we tell now the director how to map those columns to actual Icinga 2 configuration. So I'm using for the object name, I'm using the column host name. And for the address, obviously I'm using the column address from the imported data. And for the other fields, I'm creating custom variables. So for the location, I'm creating a custom variable with the same name, but use the values from the location column. And whenever something changes, we're just going to replace it. We move forward with some more fields. We're going to add an additional custom variable called environment. And a last one called type. Where is custom variable? We call it type, and we use the type column. So here we basically see what we've done now. So we use the information that we imported, and we tell Icinga Director what to do with it in order to get valid Icinga configuration out of it. One thing that I missed here now is I didn't add a template. So I'm using, for all objects that are being created here, I'm going to use the Icinga agent template by default. We can do a dry run and see what would happen if we actually trigger this sync. It tells that it would create 200 objects. We also have a detailed preview that shows us what is going to happen. So all those entries would be added if we would deploy this now. So we can see here the host objects are added with all the meta information that we have, like environment, location, type. The endpoint is created and the zone is added. But nothing happened yet, so I have to trigger this sync to actually create Icinga configuration out of it. Now 200 objects have been created, and my activity log should be full now. 200 new entries, 200 new hosts, and I can deploy this. Here we have now the 200 hosts. Now, whenever this changes, I can choose to manually trigger the import and trigger the synchronization one by one, or I can create jobs that do that periodically. Like every hour, once a day, they would import that data, they would synchronize that with Icinga configuration, and you can also automate the deployment as well if you wish to do so. The last thing that I'm going to show you today is one more time the service apply rules, because now we have more information available. I'm gonna create a new template here for local services. Local service, I call them like this because what I mean with that is that they are not executed on the master node, but they are executed on the agent itself. I'll leave out the check command here. I'm gonna import the basics from the generic service, and here we have this setting run on agent, which tells Icinga that services created by using this template should be executed on the agent and not on the master. Now we have this template available, and we can create a new service and give it a name. What do we create? Let's say disk, for example. It imports this time the local service. The check command is disk, and we assign it everywhere where let's use something different, where the type is web server, and we can add additional options here. So we are not limited to one matching expression. We can add more, of course. We can combine them with logical functions. In my scenario, I want to combine the type with the environment. So only servers of the type web servers and the environment set to production should receive a disk check, which is executed on locally on the machine. This will trigger one change here and the template, of course, but once deployed, it will create on each host that matches the expression this disk check. And this way you can, on the one side, create very dynamically what should be monitored and where with apply rules. And the other side, you can add your hosts automatically by connecting to third-party databases. Since we are already almost finished with the time we've planned, I would suggest that we hand over to Simona for some questions. And maybe if some of you still have energy and time, you can stay here for another 10 minutes after the questions. So maybe I can show you something more. Thank you so far.
Thank you, Blerim. So there were a lot of questions in the chat, but also thank you to the attendees who also already replied to some of the questions. We have one question which is highly upvoted. How can I configure two instances of the same service with different parameters on the same host using Icinga Director?
Two instances of the same service?
With different parameters on the same host. So there is an...
if I get it correctly, you would use something like a disk check, but with different parameters. So you could basically just create two service apply rules, but use different parameters. You would just have to make sure that the name of the service is unique.
So I hope this, maybe the person who asked the question can quickly give us
I can see the question. Maybe one additional thing: use case web servers with many vhosts. So this probably is a question regarding dictionary type custom variables. So right now, in the current version, the Icinga Director does not support adding. So custom variables can have different types. They can be strings, they can be booleans, they can be arrays. This is available in Icinga Director. If you're using flat files for configuration, you also have the option to use dictionaries. They are like hashes if any Ruby developers are here. So dictionaries would be a use case for this. The current Icinga Director does not have support for dictionaries. We are currently building it, most likely releasing this during Q1 next year. So Director will get support for dictionaries as well. Once this is out, you will have the option to create multiple virtual hosts and then create an apply rule that loops over this dictionary and creates a service for each entry.
Okay, great. And there was another question in the chat. Can Icinga Director deal with very large numbers of hosts, for example, 40K hosts?
Yes, we do have customers that have that amount of hosts. So the limitation is actually not Icinga Director because it's working only on the database side. The limitation can be Icinga 2. The limitation can also be the database. It should not. I mean, depending on your sizing of the machines, either here or there, you will have a bottleneck. But we do have setups in a similar size. You would need to scale out Icinga, of course. You would have to create a master setup. You would have to create multiple satellites to actually handle the monitoring load, but the Icinga Director is not the limitation point.
Great. Maybe also taking the time into consideration, we already quite at 4 p.m. in Germany. So for those who need to go now or leave the webinar because of maybe other meetings, I just want to let you know. So first of all, thank you for joining. And also let you know that we have our next webinar upcoming by early next week, focusing on Icinga notifications, which is our newest release. So yeah, definitely keep an eye out for that. You will get notified in our monthly newsletter when we have this webinar planned, but probably about February next week. And yes, for those who leave now, we wish you all a smooth end of year season and stay healthy. And for those who can stay for a few more minutes, feel free to stay so that Blaring can maybe show you a little bit more. Thank you.
Awesome. Also from my side, for those leaving, thank you very much for joining us today. We will try to answer more of these questions, maybe in a follow-up, since time is really limited, and we don't want to stretch it out completely. One more thing that I left out in the original time frame was the option to create service sets, because I like this option, but it didn't really fit into the original time frame. So we're just going to add some bonus material here, kind of. So I showed you how you can use service apply rules to create this set of services that are going to be created dynamically based on the information that you add to your hosts. Another really nice option with Icinga Director, and this is only with Icinga Director, is the way of configuring service sets. And they are what the name suggests. They are a bunch of service. Instead of a single service applied to a host, a service set can combine a group of services that are going to be applied to certain hosts. To do that, in the service view here, we can pick service sets and create a new one. So, for example, for Linux hosts. So let's imagine we're creating a set of services that we want to apply to every Linux host. No description. So first of all, we would give it a name, and for example, we would tell it that those services that I'm going to configure here should be created for all hosts that match OS type equals Linux. This is still empty. It has 0 members here and 0 services as well. And here now I can choose to add one or multiple services. For example, I'm going to add, okay, let's use the local service check. So for example, I could say that load is member of this service set. And another is, for example, processes. Whatever you have, it uses the prox command. And just one more, we can add another service called disk, because we want to make sure that when we deploy this, that every server where OS type, operating system type is set to Linux receives not a single service, but all of these 3. And I think this is a really nice option in order to bundle certain things and keep them organized. We can always see which hosts are receiving these services, the service set. So in my case, I only have one host here called agent. So you have this transparency, you have this clean overview by grouping these services and set defaults, and you still keep the option to create additional apply rules or additional single services and so on. So nothing disappears because of using service sets. It's just another way of using something similar to service apply rules, but with multiple services at once. Now I'm going to finish. Finally, thank you very much again for attending this session today. I hope we could demonstrate you how Icinga Director works and how you can benefit from using it in your daily production. Of course, Icinga Director has plenty of more features and options. We would need probably a day of showing all of them. Our intention was to demonstrate the most important or the most basic ones for those who get started with Icinga Director. Play around with it, send us feedback as usual, and don't forget to tell your friends and family about Icinga, of course.
So thank you also from my side, and have a great rest of the day or evening. So bye-bye.
Bye-bye.